The administrator of the nursing home smiled at me across his big polished desk and explained, very gently, as if to a child, that I was an anxious daughter who was misremembering things, and that their records showed my mother was receiving excellent care. He said it kindly. He said it the way you'd soothe someone who was being unreasonable. He had decided, the moment he met me, a quiet, soft-spoken woman who didn't raise her voice, that I was a nuisance to be managed, not a threat to be taken seriously. What he did not know, what he never once thought to ask, was that I had spent 18 years working in hospital medical records, that I knew exactly what a falsified care log looks like, and that I had been quietly photographing his facility's lies for 3 months. My name is Rachel Lynn. I'm 43 years old. And this is the story of how an expensive, glossy nursing home neglected my mother and tried to gaslight me into silence, and how the quiet daughter they dismissed brought them down with their own paperwork. Let me tell you about my mother first, because she is the reason for all of it, and because she deserves to be more than a case number. My mother's name is Helen. She is 78 years old, and for most of my life she was the strongest person I knew, a high school chemistry teacher for 30 years, sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who corrected the grammar on restaurant menus and remembered every former student's name. A few years ago, she began to decline. A series of small strokes, and then the slow erosion that follows, until it became clear that she needed more care than I could safely provide at home while working full-time. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life, the decisions so many of us face and dread, to place my mother in a care facility. I agonized over it. I want to tell you about the night I decided, because the guilt of it is part of why they almost got away with everything. My mother had fallen at home, alone, while I was at work, and lay on her kitchen floor for nearly 2 hours before I found her. She wasn't badly hurt, but she was frightened, and I was destroyed, by the image of her on that floor, by the knowledge that I couldn't be in 2 places at once, by the impossible math of loving someone who needs more than one working daughter can give. That night, sitting on the floor beside her long after I'd helped her up, she patted my hand and said, "It's all right, Rachel. It's time. Find me somewhere safe. Find me somewhere safe." Those were the words I carried into every glossy facility tour. And it is exactly those words, that desperate, guilty need to believe I had found her somewhere safe, that Brightwater would later use against me, because a daughter who needs to believe she made the right choice is a daughter who can be persuaded to doubt the evidence of her own eyes. And when I finally did it, I told myself I had done the responsible, loving thing. I had found her the best place I could afford. More than I could really afford, honestly. I chose the expensive one precisely because I thought expensive meant safe. The facility was called Brightwater Senior Living, and it was beautiful. That was the whole pitch. Gleaming lobbies, a player piano, brochures full of smiling silver-haired models in cardigans, a smell of fresh flowers in the entryway that I would later realize was pumped in to cover the smell of everything else. The monthly cost was staggering, nearly $9,500 a month, which I paid by draining my mother's savings and supplementing from my own. But I paid it gladly at first, because the marketing had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had convinced me that the price bought safety, dignity, attention. I thought I was buying my mother a soft landing. I was, it turned out, buying a beautiful lobby attached to a place that was quietly failing the people who lived past it. The first signs were small, the way they always are. My mother, even diminished, was still lucid enough to tell me things, in our visits and our phone calls. And she began to tell me things that troubled me. That she'd rung her call button and no one came for a very long time. That she'd been left in a wheelchair, in a hallway, for most of an afternoon. That she was often hungry. That she was lonely in a way that sounded like more than loneliness, that sounded like neglect. At first, I did what the facility was counting on me to do. I doubted her. I told myself she was confused, that her perception wasn't reliable anymore, that surely a place this expensive, this beautiful, wouldn't leave an old woman ringing a call button into the void. And the facility helped me doubt her. That is the part one want people to understand, because it is the most insidious thing they do. Every time I gently raised one of my mother's complaints with the staff, they had a soft, practiced, sympathetic answer ready. Oh, she gets a little confused about timing in the evenings. She so loves the attention when you visit. Sometimes she'll say she's been alone when really we were just in a few minutes ago. It's so common for residents to feel that way as they adjust. It's really about the transition, not the care. They never argued. They never got defensive. They simply, gently, again and again, positioned my mother as an unreliable narrator of her own life, and positioned themselves as the patient professionals kindly managing both of us. It was masterful. It exploited the one thing I was most vulnerable to, my guilt, and my desperate hope that I had found her somewhere safe. The facility's entire defense, I would come to understand, was built on exactly this, on the knowledge that the families of declining elderly people can be made to distrust their own loved ones' accounts, because the elderly are so easy to dismiss as unreliable. They weaponized my mother's frailty against her own credibility. And for a while, it worked. I am ashamed of that. But it worked. What changed everything was her arm. I came to visit one afternoon and found a large, dark bruise spanning most of my mother's forearm, a serious bruise, the kind that doesn't come from nothing. I asked the staff what had happened. And I got a story that didn't make sense, a vague tale about her bumping it on the bed rail that did not match the pattern or severity of what I was looking at. I asked to see the incident report, because any injury is supposed to generate one. There was a long delay. And when a report finally appeared, it had been written in a way that was just slightly too smooth, too complete, dated and timed in a manner that, to my eyes specifically, looked wrong. Because here is the thing about me that Brightwater never bothered to learn. I am soft-spoken. I do not make scenes. I am, by temperament, exactly the kind of person institutions assume they can manage. But I have spent 18 years of my career working in hospital health information management, medical records. My entire professional life has been about the integrity of clinical documentation. I know, better than almost anyone, what a real-time, contemporaneously written care record looks like. And I know what it looks like when records have been created after the fact, backfilled, smoothed over, written to protect the institution rather than to document the truth. I can see it the way Walter the engineer could see a fake structural crack. It is my profession. And the incident report they handed me about my mother's arm set off every alarm I have. So I stopped doubting my mother. And I started documenting. I want to be very clear and careful about what I did and did not do, because I did everything within my rights and within the law, and that mattered enormously to how this ended. I did not do anything illegal. What I did was become, quietly, the most meticulous record keeper that facility had ever encountered. First, I changed how I visited. Instead of coming at the same time each week, the predictable visit they could prepare for, I began coming at unpredictable times. Early mornings. Late evenings. Weekends. The visits they couldn't stage for. And what I saw on those unscheduled visits was a different Brightwater than the one in the brochure. I saw my mother's call light on, glowing in the hallway, for 40 minutes with no one responding, and I quietly timed it, and photographed the clock, and photographed the light. I saw her left at a dining table long after everyone else had been helped, her food cold and untouched because no one had helped her eat. I saw the same chronic understaffing, again and again, far too few aides for far too many residents, the inevitable arithmetic of a facility extracting profit by spending as little on actual care as it could. There was one evening I will never forget, because it was the moment my guilt finally turned into resolve. I came by unannounced around 8 at night, well past the tidy daytime hours when the facility was at its best, and I found my mother sitting in her wheelchair near the window in the dark. No one had turned on her light. No one had drawn her blinds or helped her into bed. She had been left there, alone, in the dark, for I don't know how long, and when I came in and she saw it was me, she started to cry, not dramatically, just quietly, the way a proud woman cries when she's been made to feel like she doesn't matter. I didn't want to bother anyone, she said, I rang, but nobody came, so I stopped ringing. I rang, but nobody came, so I stopped ringing. My mother, the chemistry teacher who corrected menus and commanded classrooms for 30 years, had been trained by that beautiful, expensive place to stop asking for help. I turned on her light, and I helped her to bed, and I sat with her until she slept. And then I went out to my car and I did not cry, which surprised me. I just felt something go very cold and very clear. They had made my mother believe she was a bother. I was going to make them understand exactly how much of a bother I could be. But I did not raise my voice that night, or any night. I did the opposite. I documented all of it. Every visit, I wrote down the date, the time, what I observed, with photographs whenever I could take them without violating anyone else's privacy. I kept a log of my mother's complaints with dates. I photographed her bruises and the conditions of her room. And, this is the part my profession made possible, I requested, formally and in writing, as is my mother's legal right, complete copies of her care records. Her medication administration records. Her care logs. Her incident reports. The daily charting that was supposed to document every aspect of her care. And when those records arrived, I read them the way I had read records for 18 years. And what I found was the entire case. The records were full of care that had not happened. There were entries logging that my mother had been repositioned and assisted with meals and checked at specific times, times when I personally had been standing in her room and knew that no such thing had occurred. There were charting entries that contradicted each other. There were medication administration records indicating medications given at times that didn't align with reality. And most damning of all, to my trained eye, there were the unmistakable signs of records created after the fact, charting that was too uniform, too complete, entered in patterns that real-time care documentation never follows. Let me explain what I mean, because this is the part only my profession could see. Real care documentation, written in real time by busy, tired aides across a long shift, is messy. It has gaps. It has variation, different abbreviations, different phrasings, entries clustered around the actual moments of care and sparse in between. It looks like human beings doing a hard job. What Brightwater's records looked like was something else entirely, row after row of identical, evenly spaced, suspiciously complete entries, as though someone had sat down at the end of a shift, or worse, after my complaint started, and filled in a perfect grid of care that no one had actually provided. I found an entry stating my mother had been assisted with evening meal, 8:75 on the exact evening I had found her alone in the dark with untouched cold food. I had the photograph, time-stamped. They had the entry. Both could not be true, and I could prove which one was. I found repositioned Q2H, repositioned every 2 hours, charted faithfully through a night I knew, because my mother told me and her untouched water pitcher confirmed it, that no one had come in at all. The grid was beautiful and complete and entirely fictional. It was, in its own way, as fake as Brightwater's lobby. They had been falsifying the records. They had been documenting a standard of care they were not providing, to bill for it and to protect themselves. And they had handed those falsified records directly to the one family member in the building who reads medical records for a living. I had, sitting on my dining table, two things that could not both be true: my dated, photographed, time-stamped documentation of what was actually happening to my mother, and the facility's official records claiming something entirely different had happened. The gap between those two things was not a misunderstanding. It was fraud, and it was neglect, and now it was documented from both directions. That is when I went to see the administrator, Mr. Caldwell. And that is when he made his mistake. I went in calmly. I did not bring my whole arsenal. I am a careful person, and you do not show your strongest hand to win a small pot. I simply raised my concerns, reasonably, about the care my mother was receiving and about some discrepancies I'd noticed in the records. I wanted to see how he would respond. And he responded exactly as men like him always respond to quiet women. He condescended. He smiled his gentle, managing smile, and he told me that I was an anxious daughter, that this was very common with families adjusting to placement, that I was likely misremembering or misunderstanding what I'd seen, and that their records, their excellent records, showed my mother was receiving wonderful care. He all but patted me on the head. He was so certain, so practiced, so comfortable in the assumption that a soft-spoken woman could be soothed and dismissed. I thanked him for his time. And I went home and finished building the case that would end his facility's ability to do this to anyone. Here is what I did, and I did all of it properly. I took my complete documentation, my photographs, my timed observations, my mother's records, and my professional analysis of how those records had been falsified, to an attorney who specialized in elder care and nursing home neglect. She looked through what I'd assembled, and I will never forget what she said. She said, "Ms. Lin, most families come to me with a feeling that something was wrong and almost no way to prove it. You've brought me a documented case of falsified records and neglect, cross-referenced against your own time-stamped evidence. I have been doing this for 20 years. This is the most thoroughly documented case anyone has ever walked into my office with." And she smiled, and she said, "You were the worst possible daughter for them to underestimate." What followed was systematic, and lawful, and devastating to Brightwater. We filed a formal complaint with the state agency that licenses and inspects care facilities, and unlike a vague complaint they could wave away, mine came with documentation, falsified records laid against time-stamped proof of what really happened. That triggered an official investigation, the kind facilities genuinely fear, because regulators who find falsified records and documented neglect have real power: fines, sanctions, conditions on licensure, public citations. We pursued a civil case for the neglect my mother had suffered and the fraud of billing premium rates for care that was systematically not provided. And because falsifying medical records and neglecting a vulnerable elder are not merely contract problems but, in many places, serious regulatory and even criminal matters, the documentation went where documentation like that goes. There was one more thing that strengthened the case, and it mattered to me more than any of the legal parts. During those months, there had been one aide at Brightwater, a young woman named Maria, who actually cared, who I had seen, on my unannounced visits, genuinely tending to my mother and the other residents, run ragged because she was doing the work of 3 people. When the investigation began, Maria, it turned out, was not the only staff member who had been sick about what was happening. Several of the people on the floor, the ones actually providing care, or trying to, had known the records were being falsified and had felt powerless to say so, afraid for their jobs. My documentation gave them cover to finally tell the truth. The understaffing, the pressure to chart care that time never allowed them to give, the directive to make the records look complete, it came out, because once the regulators were looking with real evidence in hand, the people who had been silenced were no longer alone. I had not just built a case. I had, without intending to, given the good people inside that building permission to stop participating in the lie. Brightwater's posture changed overnight. The condescension evaporated the moment their corporate lawyers saw what I had, because you cannot smile and call a woman anxious when she has handed the state regulator a side-by-side comparison of your falsified care logs and her photographs of the clock. There was no managing me anymore. There was only the cold reality of an institution that had created fraudulent records and handed them to a medical records professional. Mr. Caldwell did not smile at me again. Here is what happened after. The facility settled the civil matter, and the settlement was substantial. It returned the fees I'd paid for care that wasn't delivered, and a great deal more for the neglect and the fraud, an amount that reflected how badly they did not want the full extent of their documentation examined in open court. But as with every story like this, the money was the smallest part. The state investigation, fed by my documentation, resulted in real regulatory consequences for Brightwater: citations, fines, mandated changes, oversight. The falsified records issue, in particular, was the kind of finding that follows a facility, because a place that fabricates care records has demonstrated something a regulator cannot unsee. My quiet folder of timestamps did something 100 angry phone calls never could have. It forced a system to actually change. I moved my mother, of course, to a smaller, less glamorous, genuinely caring place. One with no player piano and no pumpkin flower smell and, as it turned out, far better actual care, because I had learned by then that the beautiful lobby and the quality of care are entirely unrelated, and sometimes inversely so. My mother is safe now. She is still sharp enough, on her good days, to be proud of me, and she told me once, in her old chemistry teacher voice, "You always did show your work, Rachel." I have never been paid a better compliment. It took her a while to come back to herself, in the new place. For the first few weeks she still apologized for needing things, still hesitated before ringing her call button, still flinched at the idea of being a bother. That was the deepest injury Brightwater did to her, deeper than the bruise, the quiet retraining of a proud woman into someone who believed her own needs were an imposition. But slowly, in a place where someone actually came when she rang, she unlearned it. The first time I visited and found her cheerfully complaining to an aide about the temperature of her tea, complaining, with her old confidence, expecting to be heard, I had to step into the hallway, because that small ordinary act of a woman who believed again that she mattered was the moment I knew it had all been worth it. And I did one more thing. I now help other families, quietly, the way I do everything, who suspect their elderly loved ones are being neglected in care facilities. I teach them the thing it took me 18 years of training and 3 terrible months to understand, that you do not have to be loud to be powerful. You have to be precise. I teach them to visit at unpredictable times, to document everything with dates and times and photographs, to formally request their loved ones' complete records, which is their legal right, and to understand that those records, in a neglectful facility, are very often the evidence of the neglect itself. The institutions that prey on the vulnerable count on families being too overwhelmed, too trusting, and too easily dismissed to keep a careful record. So I teach families to keep the record. It is the one thing these places truly fear. I want to leave you with the thing I learned, in the worst 3 months of my life, that I think anyone with a loved one in care needs to hear. Institutions that neglect the vulnerable rely on a specific kind of person not noticing, and a specific kind of person not fighting back, the overwhelmed, the trusting, the soft-spoken, the ones who can be made to doubt their own loved ones and themselves. They are very good at reading, in the first 30 seconds, which family members will cause them trouble and which can be managed with a gentle smile and a soothing word. But they read only the surface. They saw a quiet, anxious daughter who didn't raise her voice, and they concluded there was no one to fear. They never asked what the quiet daughter did for a living. They handed their fabricated records to the one person in the world professionally trained to read them, and they did it while smiling, certain they had nothing to worry about. The quiet ones are not the weak ones. Very often, the quiet one is simply the person who is paying the closest attention, and writing it all down. My name is Rachel Lynn. They neglected my mother and told me I was imagining it. They handed me falsified records, never thinking to ask that I read medical records for a living. I did not raise my voice. I raised a folder. And it turned out that the quiet daughter they were so sure they could manage had been documenting the truth, in perfect detail, the entire time. If this story meant something to you, stay a while. There are more like it here, stories about the people the powerful dismiss as harmless, and the calm, patient, perfectly documented moment those people reveal that they saw everything. No shouting. No scenes. Just a folder of timestamps, the truth it protected, and the quiet daughter who refused to look away. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.